Eugène Delacroix, the name that still crackles with the heat of revolution, color, and fierce imagination. He painted battlefields and private rooms, myth and modern life, and in each canvas he chased sensation. The shudder of a flag, the lash of a horse's mane, the human face at the moment it decides. Romantic in temperament, radical in color, Delacroix made painting feel newly alive. He could compose a scene of violent spectacle, like the death of Sardanapalus, or a political emblem, like liberty leading the people. And then, after a journey to North Africa, return with studies that would reshape European ideas about hue and light. He worked on monumental murals for the French state, carried sketchbooks everywhere, and drew from poetry, Shakespeare, and Byron as readily as from eyewitness experience. Today, we'll look closely at his pivotal works, the techniques that set him apart, and the surprising curiosities that made him both scandalous and beloved. Whether you know him for heroic crowds or somber portraits, Delacroix's art rewards the eye and the ear, and will reward your attention. Before we dive in, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support helps us keep creating more educational videos like this one. Delacroix was born in 1798 into a cultured Parisian family, and his education blended classical training with an appetite for literature. He studied at the École des Beaux-Arts, steeped in academic practice, drawing from plaster casts, mastering line, learning history painting, but he soon rebelled against an insistence on neat draftsmanship. Instead of precise linearity, he favored color as drama, inspired by the great Venetians and by Rubens' bravura. Early on, he admired theatrical gesture and literary sources. Scenes from Shakespeare and Byron recur in his output. That theatrical impulse explains much of his scale and subject choice. Full-length self-portraits in costume, theatrical stances like his famous Ravenswood Hamlet self-portrait, and dramatic history paintings that embrace emotion over didactic calm. Even in small works, you can feel that stagecraft, a pose, a turned head, a lit face, as if a play is happening right behind the canvas. Two early masterpieces crystallized Delacroix's reputation and the debates around his art. Le Massacre de Scio, painted in 1824, responded to contemporary news of suffering in Greece and announced Delacroix as an artist who would translate political outrage into monumental pity. The composition rejects heroic neatness for a layered, collapsing field of bodies and faces, a tumble of grief that asks the viewer to feel as well as to see. Look for the study heads and the way individual gestures carry moral weight. Then came La Mort de Sardanapalus, a 1827 composition that scandalized the salon. Here Delacroix flung oriental color, violent diagonals, and a perverse kind of mise-en-scène together. A tyrant in bed, servants, lovers, a scene of destruction made majestic. Critics raged at the chaos, others hailed its visionary fantasy. Both paintings show Delacroix choosing emotional truth over classical restraint, and both demonstrate his ambition to make color, pose, and chaos an expressive language capable of modern tragedy. If one image has come to stand for Delacroix in the public imagination, it is La Liberté, guidant le peuple, liberty leading the people. Painted in 1830 after the July Revolution, it mixes allegory and reportage. A bare-breasted liberty strides forward, flag aloft, among fighting citizens, students, and corpses. The composition is at once a political emblem and an intensely theatrical arrangement. Delacroix constructs a pyramid of action with liberty at its apex, a human tide flowing beneath her. Notice how he refuses to idealize every figure. There are anonymous corpses, a militia leader, a child with a rifle, and how color functions as declaration. The tricolor is more than a palette choice, it's a voice. The painting's energy, its mix of realism and symbol, made it both an instant icon and a subject for later reinterpretation. It's a painting that still reads like a shout. Delacroix's 1832 trip to Morocco was a turning point. He arrived with curiosity and left with notebooks full of acute observations, local costumes, faces, color combinations, and light effects that European studios had rarely seen firsthand. Works like The Women of Algiers capture interiors saturated with jewel-like tones and subtle fabrics, while paintings such as The Fanatics of Tangier show dynamic movement and exotic costumes filtered through Delacroix's romantic imagination. These aren't mere ethnographic documents, they're reinterpretations. He recomposed scenes to heighten color and mood, to make paint sing. The Moroccan sketches also shifted European painting vocabulary by privileging chromatic contrast and loose brushwork. Artists who followed picked up that liberated use of color and the idea that direct observation could be reworked into a poetic archive of sensation. Delacroix was a gifted portraitist and a networked man of letters and music. He painted intimate portrayals, from Georges Sand and Frédéric Chopin to anonymous models, that reveal psychological depth more than flattery. His portraits of Chopin and Georges Sand, and the fragments that survive, show a sensitivity to temperament, Chopin's refinement, Sand's confidence. Delacroix's self-portraits scatter through his career, sometimes theatrical, sometimes vulnerable. Through these works, you glimpse a man who loved music, read widely, and moved among poets and composers. Portraiture allowed him to compress character into gesture and color, and those compressed decisions translate into his larger history pictures: a turned shoulder, a hand poised, a face half in shadow, tiny acts that narrate larger dramas. Delacroix's later career included major decorative commissions. Ceilings and public murals, such as his work for the Palais Bourbon, demanded a different scale of thinking: how to make figures legible at a distance, how to build allegory across architecture. In parallel, he kept obsessively drawing and making small studies: heads, horses, drapery, violent sketches for history paintings. His technique favored luminous passages of broken brushwork that teased the eye into blending color from a short distance. He prized chromatic resonance over optical line, and he mixed pigments boldly: warm crimsons, deep greens, cool blues, to create emotional pitches within a scene. These choices influenced later painters. Impressionists and post-impressionists recognized Delacroix's liberation of color as a route toward modern painting. Behind every sensational Delacroix canvas is a mountain of studies. He drew heads and hands obsessively, sometimes in charcoal, sometimes in watercolor. These studies are revelations. A single drawn eye becomes a novel of expression. A scraped rapid wash becomes a record of how light fell in a foreign room. Look at the close-up details of Sardanapalus and the fragmentary heads from the Massacre at Chios. The violence in composition is planned, rehearsed, and then intensified on the large canvas. Curiosity fact: Delacroix often used lithographs and prints as working references and exchanged sketches with friends. His studio was a laboratory where color and gesture were tested and retested until they achieved their dramatic aim. Delacroix's legacy is dual-headed. He's the emblem of romantic drama and the secret teacher of modern color. He risked scandal and won influence. Critics blamed him for chaos. Later painters praised his chromatic courage. Monet, Cézanne, and Van Gogh saw in Delacroix a precursor. His loose brushwork and daring palettes unlocked ways to paint sensation itself. Museums today still line up to show his major canvases, and every time we look at Liberty leading the people, the Massacre at Chios, or the Women of Algiers, we encounter an artist who refused to choose between feeling and form. Thank you for joining this close look at Eugène Delacroix. If you enjoyed this exploration, consider sharing the video and revisit these paintings in person when you can. They work differently and more loudly in the room.